Now, this is a Spanish goat's cheese called Montenegro, and it's quite dense. You can eat it raw, but it's much nicer cooked. And I think the nicest way of cooking it is to deep fry it, and that's what we're going to do now. So we take a slice of that. So we're going to make a batter for the cheese. I'll just move that over there. And the cheese, before it goes in the batter, is just lightly floured. So I'm going to do that now. Just going to sprinkle a little bit of flour, give it a shake. And what that flour does is just helps the batter stick to the cheese, otherwise it does tend to run away a bit. And then that can go to one side. And we'll make the batter. Now, the easiest way, I think, of making a really, really light, crispy batter is to use a tempura flour, which is a Japanese flour, which they use for frying vegetables and scallops and prawns and that sort of thing in a really light, crispy batter. So we're just going to put some of that into a bowl. There we go. A Japanese chef once told me, always use cold, fizzy water. So we're just going to pour a little bit of water in on that and give it a bit of a mix. And another tip with tempura is don't over-mix it. It's quite nice if you've got a few lumps and they cling to the cheese. That's quite a nice, pleasing texture. There we go. This is quite a sort of modern take on cookery. When I was a young chef, this isn't the sort of thing we'd have been doing. When I left college, I left Guildford College, and really, at that point, you know, actually I still wanted to be a rock star. But on the advice of probably parents and, I don't know, all sorts of wise people, I wrote letters to all the London hotels and tried to get myself an apprenticeship. And the Ritz wrote back to me and said, yeah, we've got a space. Come and start next week. So off I went to the Ritz. And to be honest, if it hadn't have been for that one letter and that one positive response, my whole life would have been different. Because I think I would have just stayed around Guildford probably working in, you know, very, very average restaurants. So I was very lucky to work at the Ritz. It was one of those, it was a very hard apprenticeship, but you sort of came through it, and it was a bit of a, you know, you sort of thought, well, I've got my stripes now, you know, I can go out in the big bad world, and that's what I did, and I've never looked back from that point. Right, back to the cheese. Just let any excess batter drain off, which I'm doing now, and then we lower it into our pan, and which has about 2.5, 3 inches of oil in it. And we just let the cheese fizz away in that oil. Now, when I left the Ritz, it took me about 6 months of plucking up my courage to hand in my notice at the Ritz. And that wasn't because I was frightened of leaving and going working somewhere new. It was because in those days, in those big hotels, there were these sort of rites of passage. And if you were leaving, your leaving party was just the biggest, shocking nightmare ever. I was bound up with gaffer tape right the way around like this. Another bloke was leaving on the same day. We were both bound up with gaffer tape. I was thrown in a sink. They'd been saving up all the slop for days and days. It was all bubbling and fermenting. That was all poured all over me. And then they dragged me out and got me absolutely plastered. And to this day, I don't know how I got home. So it was, you know, leaving the Ritz was quite a mission in itself. But I did leave the Ritz eventually and went to work for Gary Rhodes, and he was great. I learnt an awful lot about man management from Gary. He had an excellent way of getting the most out of every member of staff, and I hope that I absorbed a lot of that lesson. He was also a big Man United fan, and we used to go up to Old Trafford together as well and meet the players, which was also very pleasant. Right, our cheese is very, very happily fried now, so I'm going to lift it out, and you can see, hopefully, it's a nice crisp batter on top. So I'm just going to give that a little drain over there. Now, we need a dish, and we're going to place the cheese in the dish, like that. And then goat's cheese has got a very, very pungent flavour, even more so, I think, when it's cooked. And you need something to balance that. And honey is, without a doubt, the way to go. And be generous. You want lots of honey on there. There we go. So just let it fall off the spoon. It might look like I'm adding crazy amounts, but it works. There we are. Right. We need a little bit of fruit with that, I think. So figs is the way to go. Now that is a beautiful fig. Cut those into 3 each side. There we are. And then we'll just sort of dot those around the dish like that and like that. A little bit of rocket, just because I quite like a bit of rocket. Just cut that down like that. Give it a little sprinkle. And that'll just give it a little bit of pepperiness, which is quite nice. Right, we now have a pretty fine lunch ahead of us. We've got our deep-fried cheese, Montenegro cheese, and to finish it all off, we need a dessert now.